Welcome back, Wheels and Wheels, to a pretty unscripted video. Basically, I want to do more Skylanders content at the moment, even though I've kind of just started doing it, but obviously I'm going to need to set up quite a bit for that, because the kind of stuff I want to do is I really want to go in depth on analysing all the characters, and I honestly want to try and find out, like, enough about all the characters that I feel like I can make a very solid tier list on their actual objective strength in the game instead of just how much I like them. However, I'm not ready to do that yet because that means obviously getting copies of all of these 32 Skylanders, having tried both of their upgrade paths. So actually I'm going to do 64. Which, yeah, that's going to take a while. Now, I am using the little exploit where you can use the Sky Diamond in the Swap Force hub to earn money way faster, but I'm also not just dedicating my life to just spamming that over and over. I'm using that whenever it's convenient to speed things up a bit, but I'm not, like, literally sitting here for hours on end to do that, so, you know, it's still going to take a while. Either way, I really wanted to do a tier list thing still, just because it's, you know, fun content, it's quite easy to do. And I thought, you know what, screw it. How about I do a tier list from mostly memory? I have played a little bit with just about all these characters since I've returned to Skylanders, but only a little bit. For the most part, well, how much I like them or don't like them, especially in the first game, is just completely going off my memory of them. And obviously when I did play the first game was nearly a decade ago. So that's going to be interesting to see how wrong I am on some of these. To start off, I've put them in order. When I first went on this template, they were all in a completely random order, so I had to order them myself, but I put these in order. I've got Whirlwind here as the first one in the air element. I'm not going to lie. Oh, where do I put Whirlwind? I hate to say this, but she could go lower, but I'll probably put her in D. Now, this is going off memory. I might be wrong here, because I have played with Whirlwind a little bit since last time I obviously played her years ago, and when I played with her more recently, she was a lot stronger than I remembered her being, but I did play her in Giants, and I obviously probably played her most in the first game, Spyro's Adventure, so maybe it was a thing of she got a lot better in Giants. I'm not sure, but either way, Whirlwind, I remember being someone who was very fun to play in theory and had some interesting stuff going on, but the problem was that she just simply didn't put out much damage, and all the cool stuff she could do was really awkward to set up in the middle of a fight, so she didn't feel very strong to me. So I always remembered her just feeling like a massively underwhelming Skylander, where I like the idea that, okay, she can shoot these like rainbow shots, that she can create these storm clouds that hurt enemies that touch them, and you can shoot the rainbow shots onto the storm clouds to have them bounce off the storm clouds to reach even further, and even with more upgrades later, split into multiple rainbow shots if they hit a cloud and bounce off of it, and then also have the clouds connect with lightning chains together. It all sounded very cool, but in practice I often found myself spending way too much trying to line this up and just ended up getting myself killed for it. It felt like the only consistent, reliable attack she had was the rainbow shots, but the rainbow shots were extremely slow and didn't do much damage at all unless you used these weird combos with the storm cloud, so I always remembered her feeling really weak. But as I say, I've come back to the game more recently, and I swear she just feels like she's doing more damage, but I don't think she is. I think she's doing the same amount of damage she always did. But I don't know. To me, it just feels like she's doing way more now. So I'm kind of torn on where to rank her. So I just put her in D. I'll do one element at a time as well. So we'll do an Earth element one next. Terrafin. Terrafin was one of the very first Skylanders I got. I obviously got the starter pack first, however I got it at Christmas, and with the starter pack I also got Terrafin's Adventure Pack, the Pirate Sea's Adventure Pack. So I do have a lot of reason to be nostalgic for Terrafin, but all that being said, I'm not going to let the nostalgia blind me. Yeah, I like Terrafin, fine enough. He's a good Skylander, you know, he's definitely very reliable. Honestly, probably a pretty good one to have gotten near the start, because I just feel like he's very straightforward to play, but that doesn't mean he's bad. He's just generally quite reliable. Being able to dodge attacks by going into the earth is quite nice. The concept of an earth shark is quite nice, especially because I feel like with Earth they probably had to put in some extra work to come up with ideas that are interesting. And I think this one delivered. So yeah, I honestly really don't have much to say about Terrafin, even though like he's one of my like longest standing ones that I have the most memories playing at the same time. Like, yeah, he just kind of punches things and he dives into the earth and sneaks under enemies. I mean, that's all you need, to be honest, though. Then in the fire element, we got Eruptor. So I've actually found out recently, as I've been getting back into Skylanders and finding the whole online Skylanders community, it seems like most people don't like Eruptor. They think that he's really generic and boring and forgettable. And I find that kind of surprising, considering how many versions of Eruptor there was, and how Eruptor almost felt like a mascot for the game in like the adverts I saw for it. I saw more of Eruptor than Spyro in the adverts for the game back when it was new. So I'm kind of surprised that people don't like Eruptor. I personally would put him up in B, and I think I'd even put him above Terrafin. I completely get the whole he's generic argument, because yes, he is a fire guy, and he's made of lava, and he shoots lava blobs, and he can also erupt to summon lava, and he can also shoot lava out of his mouth, and those are his 3 attacks. And I get it, it's like, oh, those all seem pretty boring. However, at the same time, I feel like this character is generic argument is always a bit of a weird one when it comes to Skylanders. Because technically depending on your perspective, there are so many characters that are like fan favourites. You could easily say, oh, well, they're just generic, you know. Like, everyone loves Stealth Elf. Oh, they're generic, they just slash their swords around. Oh yeah, they got a teleport move, but it sucks, you just use the sword move. And it's like, okay, well, she's got her front flip move, yeah, but that doesn't hurt enemies, you never use it except to get around faster. So when you fight with Stealth Elf, all you do is you mash the A button. Wow, she's so boring and generic. But everyone loves Stealth Elf, so I feel like it's very much a matter of perspective. And in concept, I kind of agree, Eruptor's kind of generic and boring. And when you look at his moveset, it looks like there's not much going on with it, but the upgrades with the Eruptor's moveset I really like. The ability to make the fireballs bounce to reach further, to leave pools of fire on the ground that you can lead enemies into to deal massively increased damage, the ability to make mini volcanoes when you erupt that surround you and shoot more fireballs like from there. I feel like he's just, even though he is a simple concept, they did everything they could with this simple concept. They took this simple concept and they added enough depth that it didn't get boring, and even for the parts that are pretty straightforward and boring, made him one of the most satisfying characters to just hit enemies with, which I think is enough to put him in B tier for me. Then there's Gill Grunt. So this is an interesting one, because I don't think I've seen any opinions on Gill Grunt that aren't, like, I think half the people watching this video are probably who actually had Skylanders when they were younger are probably thinking F tier, and half of them are thinking S tier. Because most people either found Gill Grunt very boring, forgettable, and disappointing, or he's an absolute classic. Oh, he's in the starter pack, how can you not call him like an S tier and all that? And I will say, this one, it might be a little bit difficult not to have nostalgia not play somewhat of a part. I'm going to put him in A tier. You see, when I played the game for the first time, I really enjoyed Skylanders. Obviously I wouldn't be making this video otherwise, but even from when I first played it, like, I instantly thought, oh wait, I really like this. And so for that reason, before I even got another Skylander, I actually beat the whole game with just the starter pack and Terrafin. Out of my first few Skylanders, back when I had a much smaller collection, Gill Grunt was always the backup plan. It was always, if things go south, if I feel like I'm going to lose, I feel like I could always rely on Gill Grunt to pull things out. But I'm not just going to rely on nostalgia to say that. I actually think that there's, at the time, I think it was, I couldn't explain why. It just felt like, oh yeah, I can always rely on it. I'm not sure why. It just feels like if I pick Gill Grunt, I might not kill the enemies quickly, but I'll always get it done, and Gill Grunt never seemed to die. And in hindsight, I can see why that is, because one of the biggest problems with Skylanders is that there is actually a lot of characters who have movesets that make it almost impossible for them to attack enemies and dodge at the same time. You don't usually really notice this at first, because if you play the first Skylanders game, of course there's no difficulty selection in that game. In the later games there's Nightmare Mode, but to make things actually difficult. But in Spyro's Adventure, because there's no difficulty selection, the game is really easy. Which means you can just tank hits and still continue and probably not die. And you can just mash buttons and kill enemies quickly. So you often don't realise just how hard it is to actually not get hit. Get through a whole level without getting hit. It's kind of difficult depending on the circumstances. If you're using the right Skylander, it can be easy, but with a decent amount of them that might even be considered good, even ones like Stealth Elf, I imagine it's quite hard to actually beat a full level without getting hit once with Stealth Elf, because she has no ranged attack. Now, obviously, if I say it's just needing a ranged attack is an important thing, then it's like, okay, why Gill Grunt then? Why not any other ranged attack? Like, there's so many people with a ranged attack in this game. However, he has one other thing that's also very important. Even with people with ranged attacks, they can still run into one other massive problem when it comes to actually trying to hit the enemies without dying yourself, which is you obviously have to aim it, which doesn't sound like a problem for anyone who has any experience with these games until you realise you can't aim without moving, because there isn't a way to change the direction your Skylander's facing without pressing to move in a direction, which means that a lot of the time, when I die, when I actually think about it, it's usually because I'm trying to turn around to hit an enemy, but as I do that, I have to push the direction to move towards the enemy. I can't just simply face towards the enemy while moving away from them. I have to pick one or the other. And a lot of the times it gets me killed that I have to turn around to face the enemy. But with Gill Grunt, if you use his water jetpack, which allows him to move faster and take less damage, while doing that, he also doesn't turn from whichever direction he was facing when you started using it. So as long as you make sure you're facing in the direction you want to shoot, and then you start using the water jetpack while shooting, you've got a high mobility character that's able to shoot things from safe distance without actually having to worry about putting himself in danger to line up shots. And he's probably the most kind of safe pick, I would say. Like, I would say this: if someone modded a nightmare mode into Spyro's Adventure, and I had to beat it with just one Skylander, I'd probably pick Gill Grunt. And yes, I fully acknowledge that there are so many other Skylanders that can put out way more damage, but I don't think that matters, because even though Gill Grunt's damage isn't impressive, his survivability is just unrivaled in my opinion. So I would put him all the way at A tier. I completely understand why some people think he's a bit boring, because his water shot-like thing, his second move, that is definitely a very weak move. And his harpoon gun is certainly respectable in my opinion, but it's definitely nowhere near as flashy as a lot of other ranged attacks in the game. But I just feel like the combination of ranged attack, mobility, and a way to lock your facing direction so you don't have to choose between running away and facing the opponent makes Gill Grunt one of the strongest picks in the game if you want to kind of try hard. So I would happily put him in A. Anyway, I know I said a lot about Gill Grunt, but you know, I had to really get in to explain why I think he's good. Anyway, Spyro, of course, the main man, the guy who's another one from the starter pack. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, if I go purely off my childhood memory of what Spyro was like, he would be going down here. I remember him being boring, having basically nothing interesting about him. The only thing I liked about him is I did like his was it Ibex's Horns path? I think it was called the one that makes his charge have gigantic fire horns after a couple seconds. That was a cool upgrade. Didn't like any of his other upgrades. I thought everything else about him was really boring. The one thing that caught my eye is that you could get him to shoot 3 fireballs at once instead of 1 with one of his upgrades, and it wasn't even on an upgrade path. But then I realised that the way it's coded is that you can't have all 3 fireballs hit one enemy if you're like dealing with one huge enemy and you want to burn it down, which I suppose I maybe should have seen coming because that would have been too good to be true. Instead, you can hit 3 enemies with 1 shot of these 3 fireballs, but if there's only 1 enemy to hit, then it will disable the hitboxes of the other 2 fireballs if one of those 3 hit that enemy. Essentially, that enemy can't be hit by the same kind of burst. You can't triple your damage that way, and so because of that, I just didn't see much with Spyro that was interesting. I do have to say though, since I came back to the game, I haven't been playing with Spyro that much, but the few times I have played with him, I've been pleasantly surprised. So much so I would put him up here almost, because I definitely still think I would pick Gill Grunt over him in this regard. But I did realise, actually with his charge move, he's quite fast. And as well as that, he has got that classic ranged attack, like I mentioned, which makes him pretty reliable for getting through levels without getting hit. The only problem is that, just like Gill Grunt, he has almost nothing flashy about him. He doesn't have great damage output, and unlike Gill Grunt, he doesn't have that way to lock his facing direction, so you still have the issue of turning around to shoot people can actually get you killed. And I think I do have to put him in D. In fact, I'll put him below Whirlwind. I do have to put him here for a couple reasons. One, obviously, as a Skylanders fan, I like most of these Skylanders, so if I just go off pure gut feeling, they're almost all going to be above C tier, so can't do that. But also because I think the final thing that makes me confident I should probably put him in D is that his flight move. Oh boy. So I know a lot of characters in the first game have their third move as just flying, which just makes you faster and take less damage. And I know that lots of people don't like it. Lots of people hate that. They think it's a waste of a move slot. And I kind of agree. I think it depends on the character. There's a decent amount of characters who their flight I actually think is a huge thing for them, and it actually doesn't feel like a waste of a move slot. It feels very, very helpful for their kit. I think that if Gill Grunt didn't have his water jetpack, which is essentially a flight move, he would actually be way, way worse. He would probably be one of the worst Skylanders in the game if he didn't have it. I think it's all about, does your flight move complement your kit well? And I think for most of these Skylanders it's true. However, Spyro's flight move is probably the best example of what happens when someone has a flight move and it doesn't complement their kit. Because one of Spyro's best moves is his charge. Well, he can't charge while flying. In fact, trying to do it will cancel his flight. So, that kind of sucks. But oh well, at least you can still shoot fireballs while flying. Only the flight is barely faster than walking. And in fact, you can outspeed a flying Spyro just by charging instead. So you can't even really use the flight for speed so much. And it's not even like, oh, but when you're charging, you're forced to just go in one direction. Because flying also makes it harder to turn and makes you more slippery, which is just about as hard to control as you when you're charging. So, yeah. Flight on Spyro is borderline useless. On other characters, I'd be willing to defend it. On Spyro, no, it is a waste of a move slot. I'm not even going to argue that. Also, I guess, oh yeah, one last thing. This has always bothered me. I imagine that the only reason I haven't heard anyone saying this is kind of obvious, but screw it. I haven't heard anyone saying this, and so I want to say it, even if it is obvious. I was always super bothered by the fact that Spyro's in the magic element. I don't know, I always thought that the magic element had lots of potential cool ideas they could do with it, and I was really frustrated that one of those valuable 4 slots for Magic Skylanders was taken up by Spyro, when, what does he do that's magic? He breathes fire, but he's a dragon already. That's what dragons do. He can fly, as dragons do. They have a little sparkle animation on his flying, probably to really make it seem like he should be in the magic element when he really shouldn't. It just always bothered me. I know he's a magical dragon, but we don't have any magic-related moves in his actual moveset, so eh. Anyway, getting into the tech element. Oh boy. Trigger happy from the starter pack as well. Oh boy, am I gonna drop a hot take here? I don't know. Am I? Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I don't know. I can never make up my mind on Trigger Happy. He seems well liked, and I kind of get it. He does just kind of shoot, but it is just kind of fun, you know? You shoot fast, you have the golden coins bouncing all over the place, you have the Gatling gun option, you have the ability to be throwing pots of gold everywhere, and certainly even though the gun pack is usually the more powerful one, the ability to toss the giant coin and have it have different effects depending whether it lands on heads or tails is very creative. I think the main thing that bothers me about Trigger Happy is no one ever calls him out for being generic, and I guess it's because he's in the starter pack, but then people call Gill Grunt out for being generic. And Trigger Happy, I mean, he's got that range attack that I said that a lot of people Skylanders need to not be able to dodge hits well, but other than that, he doesn't really have a good movement option. He doesn't really have a good way to lock his movement so he can aim better. Lock the direction he's facing. So I honestly don't think I'm that much of a fan of Trigger Happy. I don't know. I think the best way to put it is I can see why people like him, but I don't feel it myself when I play him. I think that he's just kind of, there's nothing quote-unquote wrong with him, but he's just simply generic in my opinion. And he just doesn't get called out for it because, I guess, just because he's got that fan favourite aura around him. Anyway, Stump Smash. Actually, where am I putting Stump Smash? I think here. So yeah, I think okay, maybe a bit spoilersy for the rest of this tier list, but I'll say this. I think Stump Smash is the worst Skylander in the life element in the first game, easily. But I think that's just a testament to how amazing all the Skylanders in the life element are in the first game, and not a testament to Stump Smash being bad. It is very satisfying to play him. He is just kind of punchy. You know, you just kind of mash the attack buttons, but again, just like Trigger Happy, can't deny, it does feel good. And the ability to create that giant kind of spike nut and roll it around does add some extra depth to the way he plays. I just don't have much to say about him, of course. He's meant to be a simple but fun character, and that's what he is. He's a simple but fun character. Ghost Roaster. Now, I don't remember the entire order of every single one I got, obviously. But I do remember that I'm pretty sure Ghost Roaster was the very next one I got after Terrafin. I got his Darklight Crypt Adventure Pack. And so I've had him for a while. However, I'm not going to lie, I don't think I ever felt very attached to him. I'm not going to speak to his actual like damage numbers and pure strength, because if I remember right, he is actually capable of dealing some of the highest amount of damage in all of the first game, just because of his like skull charge. Even if it isn't like particularly easily to use without getting hit yourself, it does do a kind of stupid amount of damage. At least by the first game standards, but I'll put him there. I'm not gonna lie, I do have some nostalgia factor with this guy, but other than that, like, I don't know, like, I don't see people talk about this guy much, but the few times I've seen people talk about Ghost Roaster, they seem to really like him, and I'm not gonna lie, I can't remember like anything about him that stands out to me, except his ectoplasm mode, which I thought was the only thing that was really particularly interesting about him, about his moveset, but then his ectoplasm mode wasn't really that useful as far as I remember. I just remember using it to kill myself in the hub world, because that was the only way you could ever die in the hub world. I wonder if that's still the case. I've not played, I kind of stopped playing at Swap Force, although I'm planning to catch up. I'm interested to see if that was ever changed. Like if Ghost Roaster is still the only Skylander in all of the Skylander series who can kill himself in the hub world. Anyway, yeah, I think what's especially disappointing is I'm not even talking about his chain move at the moment, because even though its damage output is pretty good, of course its range is pathetic, and of course it is just a you press the button and you hit people in front of you move. And, you know, you could say, oh, but you just said Stump Smash is really satisfying, and Terrafin's really satisfying, and they're like that too. But I think the problem is, at least with Terrafin and Stump Smash, they attack relatively quickly, and they have the ability to do combos with them, even if they're quite simple combos. Whereas Ghost Roaster, as far as I remember, he literally never gets anything that lets him do anything else with the chain. He just swings it, and it deals damage. And it swings pretty slow, too. So, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I think I'm almost convinced myself to put him, you know what? Yeah, I'll put him down here. Yeah. Honestly, I didn't mean to start out so negative. I mean, no, I've been positive somewhat. Of course, I put Gill Grunt up there. But, there are definitely a lot more that I'm going to speak more nicely about in future. Sonic Boom. Okay, this is a bit of a weird one, because I am honestly having almost a Mandela effect moment where I'm like, no, I swear that they were like this. Because if I was going purely off of nothing more than my memory of what they were like from when I played when I was younger, I'd put them like here, maybe even here. Because I just remembered it being, I don't mind the idea of this Skylander, the ability to like screech and it sends out shockwaves, and the ability to, I especially like the ability to summon little babies that attack for you with their eggs. But I just thought in practice, like, what, she does like no damage. I just remember her dealing like no damage at all. But then when I've come back to replay the first game, she's been dealing insane amounts of damage when she's not even that upgraded, and I'm thinking, wait, like, do I just remember it all wrong? Like, do I just have it all wrong? So I'll say this. If I was to go off of purely my memory of them now, like, from the couple hours I've played with them, since I got back into it, couple hours now, that's probably overshooting it even, like, they honestly were probably like top of A, because when I've been playing them now, they feel crazy strong. They feel like they deal way more damage than I remember. Their flight, I think it might be the fastest flight in the game, and it complements their moveset well, since the Screech is quite short range, so having that insane speed helps compensate for the short range. And the babies are the only thing that's kind of underwhelmed me now, which is kind of funny because it was the opposite way around before. The only part I liked about Sonic Boom was the babies when I was younger. Well, anyway, I always remembered though that I preferred Sonic Boom over Whirlwind, even though I wasn't a fan of either of them when I was younger. So I'd definitely put them above Whirlwind. I think I'm gonna put them here for now. If I play with them more and I still think they still seem really strong, then I definitely move them up. But I'm honestly having a moment where I'm like, do I just remember this wrong? Am I doing something different? Anyway, next in the Earth element is Bash. So, by the way, I just realised I don't think I mentioned. I've ordered each of these in each element in the order that I believe I got them. I don't remember off by heart, of course. I'm not entirely sure. However, I have a general memory, and I believe that Bash was the second Skylander I got in the Earth element. And, not gonna lie, I do not see the appeal, like, at all. Like, in fact... Oh god, am I gonna put him... Yeah, I think I'm putting him in F. I'll say this, he's high F, but he's an F for me. It's gonna be an F from me, dog. Yeah, I do not get the appreciation for Bash. Like, can we... I don't understand why people bring up the, oh, this Skylander is so generic and boring argument so many times when they talk about Skylanders they don't like, and no one ever says it about Bash. When he's quite literally just this dinosaur thing with a mace for a tail, and he bashes people with his tail. It's like, okay, what else do you do? Oh, I can also roll and bash people with my roll. Okay, what else do you do? I can also make stones appear. Okay, cool. I don't know, he just seems like absolutely the most forgettable character in the entire first game in terms of pure design. And I have to admit that it's somewhat compensated for by two factors. One being that they did really try to make his rocks more interesting with the whole you can summon a stone pillar and then bash the stone pillar to shoot a rock out from it in the direction you bashed it. The fact you can deflect projectiles with his tail swipe, the fact that his tail swipe, even though it is slow, does deal some absurd damage by the third game standards, which does make him technically quite a strong pick, even though he seems quite weak otherwise in other areas. I don't know though, just in terms of fun factor, concept, everything else like that, I've always felt like his Skylanders really lacking, never liked them. I think I really didn't particularly want this one, but they were in a triple pack, and I think I wanted the other two Skylanders, if I remember right, in it, so I was like, whatever. Anyway, time to be a bit more positive though, Flameslinger. Yeah, I think you deserve to be up there, buddy. I feel almost exactly the same about Flameslinger than I do about Gill Grunt. The only difference is, of course, Flameslinger unfortunately does not have Gill Grunt's ability to use the water jetpack to lock his facing direction to make aiming easier. But to compensate, Flameslinger, I'm not entirely sure, but it always felt like he had a miniature hitbox. Like, I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but obviously Giants have bigger hitboxes than normal Skylanders, so I wouldn't be surprised if each Skylander had a different hitbox size. And it feels like it's so easy to just slip between shots with Flameslinger. It feels like you can get through the tiniest gaps with him without him getting hit by anything. And so that helps to compensate a bit. And of course, as well as that, his second move allows him to move really, really fast, which also kind of helps compensate and makes it easier to dodge with him. I also think that his third move, where he just shoots a whole barrage of arrows from a long distance, makes him a little bit better than Gill Grunt in a lot of situations. It's still pretty neck and neck between these guys. Like, I'd have a hard time picking between these two, but I would guess Flameslinger would probably win out between these two, because I did mention the main problem with Gill Grunt is, even though he's amazing at surviving, there is basically no way to make his damage output impressive. It's basically always going to be disappointing. It's always going to take a while to kill things with Gill Grunt, whereas with Flameslinger, he's not the flashiest of Skylanders, he can't melt things in seconds. However, with the barrage move, if you got the right setup with the flame trails and all that, you can sometimes put out insane bursts of damage that can definitely deal with things a lot faster than Gill Grunt can, even if it's not the fastest in the game. But of course, that is at a safe range, so that's why it has that kind of slower speed. Slambam. I think Slambam is gonna go here. And actually, and just a small tweak, I actually think I'll swap these around. I think I like Sonic Boom more than I like Trigger Happy. Slambam, I think... I don't know, I've never been able to make up my mind on him. Every single time I play him, I always think, this guy's better than I remember, or This guy's just as boring as I remember. You know? Of course, he's a more brawly kind of Skylander, and that's got always going to have that trap of, oh, they just punch things, or what else do they do, you know. Slambam compensates for this somewhat, having combos and all that, and the ability to use his second move to freeze enemies and then shatter their ice prisons to cause ice explosions, you know, adds some level of intrigue. But I think the thing that's really the last nail in the coffin that makes me think that he belongs in C tier is his third move. If it was something useful and interesting, I think it could have saved his kit from coming off as boring and forgettable. But the problem is that his third move is basically useless outside of combat. So, inside of combat, I mean. Outside of combat, you can use it to move faster, but yeah, he basically just gets on a sleigh and... Was it a surfboard or a sleigh? Oh, it was a surfboard, but it's not upgraded, and it was a sleigh when it is upgraded. Yeah. He gets on like a sleigh or a surfboard, or whichever one, and moves faster while he's on it. And with the Soul Gem upgrade, I believe it was, it does become a sleigh, and that means you can actually damage enemies with it, but the damage is not that impressive. So, as much as I don't mind the idea of a move that allows you to move faster, the fact it has basically no application outside of just moving faster outside of battles makes me think that, I think C tier is the place for you. Next in the magic element, Double Trouble. You know what? I don't know why I've never had the strong opinion on Double Trouble. I've never disliked him, but I've never really, like, when I think of, oh yeah, they're one of my favourite Skylanders, this guy never seems to come to mind. But then, as well as that, I can't really think of anything wrong with him. And having played him more recently, I think I might even go as far as to say A tier. Double Trouble does seem to be quite well liked by people who have played the first game. People who haven't played the first game but have some of the first game Skylanders from Series 2s and Series 3s, from what I've seen typically, don't seem to be pretty neutral to Double Trouble, or just don't seem to be very aware of him. But it seems like most people played the first game, he was one of their absolute favourites, and at first I was kind of surprised to see this. Again, I liked him fine, but he didn't really stand out to me as, like, amazing. But having played him more recently, I can see exactly why. His first attack, allowing him to attach a beam onto an enemy to deal damage over time, is simple, and it's not quite as long range as some other range moves, but I can't lie, it's effective. It deals decent damage when fully upgraded. Not insane, but definitely good damage for the standards of the first game, before things really got power crept. And I think what's important is the fact that the beam locks onto things, and I think you even move a little faster while the beam is locked onto. At least it feels like it, that as long as your beam is locked onto something, you move faster. It means that Double Trouble is not too bad at being able to move to dodge shots while dealing damage. His second move allows him to summon, obviously, doubles of himself that will move up to enemies and explode on them. I've always found this move's pure damage to be a little bit disappointing, and of course the AI of these things isn't perfect. Sometimes they'll go for one tiny enemy and waste all their damage on killing that one chompy or whatever, when there are much more important targets to deal with. But that being said, this move is something you can use outside of combat before you go into a fight and charge up just an army of these things and then walk in, and you get just a nice damage boost right off the bat. And of course it's always something you can do when you're in a fight, but for whatever reason you aren't able to attack with anything else, you just need a moment where you just need to walk away in a direction or whatever, you can just summon a double watt in that time if you want to, because it doesn't slow you down or anything. And his third attack, Magic Bomb, if I remember correctly, it's basically useless when you first get it, but once you get the upgrade that allows him to do it 3 times in a row, it is an absolute beast when it comes to area damage. In the first game, seeing attacks that deal even like more than 50 damage, even as a slow, powerful attack, is kind of rare. So seeing a move which is, yes, a little bit slow, but has an enormous area of effect that can hit multiple enemies, that, if I remember right, deals 65 damage 3 times in a row in succession, is kind of enormous by the first game standards, even if in later games that might be just decent. In the first game, that is an absurd amount of damage. So, yeah, honestly, even though I never really think of Double Trouble as, oh yeah, he's one of the best, at the same time, I think he kind of deserves that spot. Drill Sergeant. So, fun story, when I was going off of just the previews of the soul gems of these characters to decide which ones I wanted next, Drill Sergeant was the one I got the... I don't even remember why, but I always thought Drill Sergeant looked the most overpowered by far. I fully expected Drill Sergeant would be the most OP Skylander in the entire game. And of course I got him and I realised that wasn't true at all. Which almost made the disappointment make me think, oh, this character ain't great. But I still enjoyed them. I had a moment where I was like, oh no, they're bad. Oh no, I've wasted my... But you know, okay, to be fair, I don't see people really have much love for Drill Sergeant anymore. I mostly see people either just forget about him even existing, or if they do bring him up, they say he's weak, if anything. But I do think he's still quite strong, even though I was definitely wrong about him being overpowered. It's just that it's mostly his Auto Blaster, his third attack, that's really strong. His homing drills definitely are a little bit disappointing in terms of their damage output, and his charge is definitely nice to move around faster, but of course also isn't the best for actually dealing damage. However, that Auto Blaster, it shoots really fast, and fully upgraded, that thing actually kind of melts through enemies, and again, by Spyro's Adventure damage standards. So I do think that, yeah, pretty solid B tier. I'd probably put him... You know what? I'd probably even go as far as to put him as the top of B tier, because I think the fun factor helps compensate for his other weaknesses. If it'll let me, no, it won't let me. I'll do that. So yeah, I think I'll put Drill Sergeant there. Next we got Stealth Elf. Okay. Oh, are you ready for this hot, spicy take? Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? Nah, I'm memeing. I'm not doing that. The spicy take is that she's an A tier, but she's not an S tier. I think that just about everyone who... I can't lie to myself. Nah, well, actually, yeah, I'll put her there. Yeah, so I think just about everyone who has played the first game will non-stop sing the praises of Stealth Elf. They will not stop simping for this girl. I don't know, I always feel like she's kind of overpraised. Don't get me wrong, she's still very, very good. But I see people calling her the most overpowered character in the first game a lot. And in fact, a lot of them say it's not even close. There's no one that even comes close to being as strong as her. And that, I think, is far from true. Definitely, Stealth Elf is one of the most flashy. She's got a high movement speed, which is obviously very good for dodging things. She's relatively small hitbox and all that. And if you take the Blades path on her, her damage output is absolutely insane, again, by the first game standards. Even if you take the other path, the teleportation path, if you can, even though it's a bit awkward to set up, get it so you've got these triple scarecrows with spinning blades on them, surrounding enemies, you can also melt them pretty quickly. And of course, a Soul Gem even allows her to constantly regenerate her health at all times. My main problem with Stealth Elf is, and to be fair, there is no difficulty selection in the first game, which means no Nightmare mode exists to make the game difficult, which is why it's, you know, generally a pretty easy game. So I will say this, I understand that this kind of point is a little bit moot because a Nightmare mode doesn't exist, but if we imagine a Nightmare mode existed in Spyro's Adventure, I would actually not want to bring Stealth Elf into that. I imagine if a Nightmare difficulty existed for the first game, Stealth Elf would actually be, well, not one of the weaker picks, but definitely not one of your top 4 or 5 picks. I feel like she would constantly rush in, try to rush people down with her immense damage potential, but then realise that the enemies aren't dying because it's Nightmare mode, and take a hit and instantly die because it's Nightmare mode, and she takes like 300 damage for getting hit by one tiny enemy. And she doesn't have that much health compared to some of the Skylanders, obviously, so she won't be able to survive many hits. So obviously that's not the case. In the first game, even at the later levels, enemies don't do that much damage to you if you get hit, and they don't have enough health to survive long enough to just actually kill Stealth Elf if she just lays damage into them. But because of the fact she has no ranged attack, because of the fact that the only attack she really has that actually does do a good amount of damage is her blade attack, and that obviously requires it to get right up in enemies' faces, it's really hard to not get hit with Stealth Elf while actually doing the good damage that she's known for. A lot of the time you're going to actually have to sacrifice her amazing DPS to avoid getting hit, or just, you know, run in and tank it all and mash those buttons. You see, it's kind of funny, no one ever really brings Stealth Elf up as like a mindless character to play, and I definitely don't think she is mindless, but it's kind of funny because they call other Skylanders that press the A button a lot mindless to play, but they never call Stealth Elf that, even though the whole reason Stealth Elf is thought of to be one of the best in the game is because her blades melt everything, so you can just keep pressing the A button and everything gets chopped up. So yeah, I still like Stealth Elf. I'm mostly being critical of it here because I'm pretty sure most people would have an unquestionable S tier, or they would just create a new tier called SS tier and just put her in there, honestly. I feel like most people would. So, all that being said, the nice things that people say about Stealth Elf, the good things that are said about her, are for the most part true. I just think they're exaggerated. But I still really like her. But as I say, if I had to go into a Nightmare Mode version of Spyro's Adventure, I would not bring Stealth Elf. I'd bring Gill Grunt, I'd bring Flameslinger, I'd bring some of the S tiers we're going to have later. Anyway, which leaves the Undead Element's third one. Second one, I mean. Hex. So, Hex is generally disliked or forgotten in the community, which I find surprising. I mean, I can kind of get it. She is just a witch, you know. There's more creative ones out there. But I always thought that Hex was really fun to play, and in fact, one of the stronger picks. And, okay, I was almost about to put her in A tier. I think that is being a bit too contrary. That is almost being a little bit too just to show off to, like, just to stick it to the people who say that Hex is bad. I wouldn't say she's A tier, but she's really good in my opinion, and very, very underrated. I don't know, people say that she's very boring to play, but I mean, again, this is always like a bit of a weirder one, because like, you can make an argument that every Skylander is extremely, like, flat and let me restart that. You can make an argument that just about any Skylander in the game doesn't take much skill to play, and it's pretty straightforward, and you just press this button over and over and over. I mean, each Skylander only has 3 attacks. Most of them basically only have 2 attacks, because usually their 3rd attack exists just to make them move faster, because it's either a flight move or it's like Slambam Slay. And of course, as well as that, there's often not much of a requirement in the first game to actually have to dodge, because of the fact that none of the enemies can do enough damage that you really need to. So, you know, you could always make the argument of, oh, you just hold forward and mash this attack button with this character. I feel like if you take that aside, Hex really has a lot going for her. She, of course, has a nice fast range attack, although it is very simple. You just kind of shoot it and it fires out, I'll admit that. But the real things I like about Hex is her Whirl of Bones and her Skull spell. So a second attack allows her to charge up a bunch of magical skulls and then launch them into the air, where they'll later fall from the sky and land on enemies, dealing massive amounts of damage by the first game standards. Also in an area, so you can hit multiple people. Unupgraded, Hex can only summon 2 of these, but she can summon far more of them if you obviously get some more upgrades. And the only downside to this attack is if you do get hit while charging it, it cancels your entire charge. Which I think is probably the reason most people don't like Hex, is because they spend all their time trying to charge it, and then they get it cancelled, and they get frustrated that they got cancelled. But the thing is that she can move while charging. She does move a little bit slower, but she can move while charging. Which makes it so that, honestly, with my experience playing Hex, as long as you make sure to dodge attacks while you're charging your own skulls, which usually is pretty doable, you're usually given enough time to do so, and none of the enemies in the first game attack particularly fast, so you can't react or anything. As long as you're able to do that, her skulls are one of the most reliable attacks in the game, because of the fact that obviously since they fall from the sky on top of the enemies, they don't have to be aimed at them. You just have to make sure that you survive getting the full charge up without getting hit, and then if you get that, you get massive damage in a wide area that also never misses. And as well as that, of course, Hex's Wall of Bones helps with that, which you can put up to provide her some protection while she charges these skulls. The Wall of Bones definitely isn't quite as useful until you start getting upgrades that make it spiked and all that, so enemies touching it get hurt. But it is a really nice quality of life thing as well, if you weren't aware that if you want to move through the Wall of Bones, but you've obviously already sealed yourself up by putting up that wall, if you walk into it, the bones will actually sink into the ground and you can walk over them and then they'll pop back up. Little details like that made me really appreciate the effort they put into making Hex, and making me really sad to see that most people either forget Hex exists, or when they do remember she exists, they call her generic or extremely boring to play, which I feel like is pretty undeserved. Anyway, then for the air element, Lightning Rod. Oh boy, did I have a nightmare trying to find this guy. I know that most of you had trouble getting Wham-Shell when it came to getting all your Series 1 Skylanders from the first game, but I actually never had any trouble getting Wham-Shell. I'm not sure if that's like America-UK difference, but Lightning Rod was one of the more difficult ones. Not the most difficult, we'll get to that later, but I very, very rarely saw Lightning Rod available in stores and all that, so it took a while for me to get him, but I eventually got him. And to be honest, I have almost no idea where I want to put him. Because I have a very foggy memory of him, specifically. I don't know what it is, but even though I'm pretty sure I did play with him a decent amount, I struggle to remember what I thought of him. I don't even remember what his third attack is, to be completely honest with you. I remember that obviously his first attack is throwing the lightning bolts, and his second attack was the gigantic lightning bolt that you could control, like, manually yourself, where it goes to. And I remember especially that second attack being super powerful and very satisfying to use. Generally, my memory of Lightning Rod is basically just that. He was mostly just satisfying to use, but I don't know if I'd say he had many other merits. He's not particularly good at dodging, he's kind of a bit slow, and his damage output isn't necessarily the best in the game, but it's definitely up there, and he's, yeah, very satisfying to use. I think all that is good enough to say he's about the same level as Stump Smash for me. Okay, my gut feeling is that he was better than Stump Smash, but my memory of him is so foggy that honestly, these might be pretty interchangeable. Anyway, next in the Earth element is Prism Break. Oh boy, I might be about to commit blasphemy. I've never been that much of a Prism Break fan. I say that. I'm still putting him at C. I don't think he's bad. I feel like his laser, the way it slowly deals damage instead of doing lots of little hits, feels very weird and unsatisfying. I think the idea of refracting the lasers through the crystals is pretty cool, but it's just, that's kind of the main thing he has. He doesn't have much else going for him, and I feel like it's kind of clunky to use, just like Whirlwind with the Storm Clouds in practice, even though I appreciate the concept. So, yeah, he was just never one I was attracted to very much, especially, if I remember right, he's very slow. And already that's one of the biggest problems with Skylanders in general, is that they all move too slow. So, having one that has an even slower movement speed than the already slow average movement speed is definitely a turn-off for me. I mean, it kind of makes sense for a big crystal golem thing, but yeah. Anyway, back to more positive ones though. Ignitor. Oh boy. I think I put Ignitor here, in A tier. Ignitor was a massive pleasant surprise for me. Ignitor, at first to me, felt like he would be, looking at him, just very forgettable, very generic. He is a fire sword guy, that's it, I thought, at first. But then when I actually got to play him, I was very pleasantly surprised, because even though that is what he's like with his first and third attack, his second attack is far more interesting. The ability to literally shoot his flaming soul out from the face of his armor, and then control it separate from his body, being completely invincible and burning anyone who touches him, but then having to protect the now lifeless suit of armor that you've left behind, because that can still be damaged and that will hurt you. I just think that's such a cool idea. It was so satisfying to rush through enemies with your invincible flame form, and even though the rest of his other attacks are generic, just swinging around his sword or getting a big slam with his sword, at the same time, they're still very functional. They obviously are very good for when this kind of almost a little bit janky moving around in this flame form separate from your main body. Whenever that won't do the job, it's nice to be able to just have a nice melee attack to whack your opponents with. So yeah, I think that Ignitor is absolute A tier material easily. I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't had anyone in S yet. I was actually a bit worried I'd have way too many in S at first. But actually, now I think about it, yeah, I think there's only a couple I'd put in S. You see, I've shown restraint because I was considering putting Flameslinger and Gill Grunt in S, but I thought I might be overrating them a little bit. Anyway, Zap. Going purely off my memory with him, here. I don't even think I've played Zap yet since I revisited the games. Just kind of forgettable. And I mean, okay, I like the concept of you leave water behind and you use your electricity breath and the water to conduct the water and deal extra electric damage. I like the idea, do not get me wrong, I love that idea. I think the problem is that it just doesn't feel very satisfying to actually pull it off. It feels a bit awkward to actually set up, and then when you actually get it done, it doesn't feel like you get much reward for it. It feels like Zap's damage is very underwhelming even by the first game standards. And it just feels like he should be able to shoot faster. It feels like he should be able to do more, and he just can't. So, yeah, I've never been a big fan of Zap. But, as I said, I haven't really given much of a chance since I came back, so maybe I would turn around on that. In the magic element, the next one we got is Wrecking Ball. You know what? I'm gonna do it. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I think Wrecking Ball... You know what? No, I'm doing that. I'm calling Wrecking Ball the worst one so far out of the ones we picked. He might be my bottom pick. I don't know. I haven't used Wrecking Ball much, so I was thinking, maybe he shouldn't be my bottom pick, but honestly, I think he probably is. It's just there's nothing really strong about his moveset. There's nothing really that fun about his moveset, really. And the concept of what he is, I mean, it could have been created maybe for another element, but for magic, it just feels like, why is this here? It feels like, it's really weird, because as I say, I felt like the magic element had a lot of potential for interesting Skylanders in the first game, but it feels like they tried to fill out the magic element with lots of things that aren't really magic, but then they just kind of jammed them into magic anyway, because they were running out of ideas for magic or something. Double Trouble feels like the only character in the magic element that should be in the magic element in the first game, to be honest. Wrecking Ball, it's just like this weird grub thing, and it's like, okay. At least I thought the design looked unique, and I thought, okay, the idea that he rolls around, this could be interesting. But when I actually played Wrecking Ball, I just found them just a mess. So their tongue attack is extremely slow and extremely weak, even by the first game's damage standards. It at the very least can insta-kill smaller enemies when fully upgraded, and he can then regenerate health by doing that. But this is pretty narrow in its use cases, and I believe that's their Soul Gem upgrade as well, so that's the most expensive upgrade you can buy with them, is just to make his tongue attack usable. Then you got his rolling attack, which is near impossible to control, and unless you've got lots and lots of smaller targets to deal with, is not very practical for actually dealing damage. And if I remember right, the only attack he really had that was even kind of half decent for dealing damage was his burp attack, and I don't have any good memories really of playing Wrecking Ball. I just remember him feeling very clunky. He wasn't one of the ones that I looked at and instantly thought, yeah, I don't like this one. Like, I looked at him and I was like, I'm not sure how to feel about this one. Maybe I'll like this one, maybe I won't. And yeah, they just kind of disappointed me on almost every front. But all that being said, you knew what's happening. Drobot in S tier. Okay, so I know that it's become kind of a bit of a thing in the Skylanders community now, where a lot of people think Drobot is super overrated. So obviously I gotta make my argument for why he isn't overrated now. I will say I fully actually understand where the people who think Drobot is overrated are coming from, but I think there's just one massive problem they're making when they assess Drobot, and that is they are mostly looking at them either from the perspective of only having played them quickly. I can tell sometimes by what they say about him, or from the perspective of someone who hasn't played the first game but still has Drobot. You see, the thing is, I've alluded to this a few times, damage numbers just kept going up in every Skylanders game. I don't know, it wasn't crazy noticeable in Giants, but I definitely, the jump from Giants to Swap Force, I realised that a lot of the newer characters now had enormous damage numbers on just their normal moves compared to the first game. I mean, as I say, in the first game, something like 40 damage would be absolutely insane in the first game. Well, maybe not insane, but pretty high. I believe Spyro's Fireball in the first game does 25 damage unupgraded. In Swap Force it does 42. They had to increase it, and even then, that Spyro's one of the weaker characters, I would say, in Swap Force by their standards for power. So they nearly doubled the damage of Spyro's Fireballs, and he's still not a particularly strong pick in Swap Force. I think that's pretty indicative of just how much damage numbers went up. So if you're playing Drobot in the newer games and you're like, what the hell, I thought everyone said this guy's super overpowered and crazy fun, you're like, you're playing the wrong game. If you play him in the first game, he just melts anything he touches. He deals damage faster than any other character in the game except maybe Stealth Elf, but as I say, Stealth Elf has to get right in their face to deal that damage, whereas Drobot can do it with his laser vision from a nice and safe distance. So yes, I get the other argument that people have about Drobot is that he's super boring to play because the only thing he has is laser vision. Because his second attack, the blade gears he shoots, which bounce off walls, does pathetic damage. Now, the blade gears can hit multiple enemies if you get the right angle, and you do shoot 2 of them, but you don't shoot them straight, and it's just kind of awkward trying to really get them to land. Definitely, out of his 2 upgrade paths, even if you're trying to make blade gears work, you should basically always be taking the top laser path. But yeah, I get the argument because it's like, okay, well his second attack is these stupid blade gears, and his third attack is just him flying, and the flying attack sucks, so, and it's not even an attack really. So that means that Drobot just has laser vision, so he's boring to play. And I get where they're coming from, but if you actually play him more, you'll realise that, for one, the flight is a lot more useful on Drobot than it is on some other characters, and for two, the blade gears even do have a small use case. I'm not going to say they're the best, they definitely should make the blade gears better, but they're not as bad as a lot of people thought. So, okay, first of all, with the flight. A lot of people do not like Drobot's flight because it feels quite a bit different to the other characters in the game. Drobot cannot stop moving while flying. If he touches a wall while flying, it cancels its flight. And although he moves a decent amount faster, he also struggles to turn while flying. And so that can kind of frustrate a lot of people because they're trying to move around while flying and they're just bumping into walls. And, you know, it definitely takes some getting used to, but I like it because it's actually genuinely something that I feel the more you play with Drobot, it is actually a thing of skill and not necessarily just it controls like garbage. The more I played with Drobot, the more I've gotten used to it to the point where it actually started to feel pretty comfortable flying with Drobot, and he became one of my favourite characters to fly with. And as well as that, there is actually something that helps compensate for any times when you aren't able to turn fast enough but don't want to have your flight cancelled, and that's his hover mode, which I can completely understand if people don't like it because it is a shame that it takes up a whole upgrade slot and it doesn't feel like much of an upgrade when you first get it. Essentially, by holding down the fly button instead of tapping it, you could go into hover mode where instead of like moving extra fast but not being able to turn, he would instead lock himself in place, locked facing the direction he was facing when you start doing this hover. So just like Gill Grunt, you can use this to make him force him to face the correct direction while shooting. And also allows you to move at a slower pace, but in whichever direction you want without turning Drobot. And this all sounds very niche, but it becomes more useful when obviously, again, you need to line up shots without changing the way you're turning, but still being able to dodge. It's helpful for that. But it's also helpful for if you don't want to have your flight cancelled by going into a wall, but you aren't able to turn out the way fast enough, you can actually go into hover mode from a normal flight, and when you go out of hover mode, you'll go back into your normal flight. So you can kind of catch yourself if you're about to fly into an attack or fly into a wall. You can quickly go into hover mode, adjust yourself a teensy bit so you get a bit more space to turn, and then go back into flight mode. Then, if we get back to the blade gears, although they're pretty useless when you use them normally, if you use them while flying, sadly not in hover mode, but if you use them while in normal flying mode, Drobot will actually shoot them behind him, which might seem like a small change, but it's actually quite big, because again, a lot of the time, if you're trying to dodge attacks, you'll probably be moving away from where you want to shoot, which is a problem because obviously that means that you can't face the direction you want to shoot. So the ability to shoot blade gears backwards makes it so that a lot of the time in situations where you otherwise just have to run and not be able to attack enemies, you can at least be shooting a blade gear back at them while flying to get away from whatever they're about to hit you with. So when you put this all together, Drobot certainly seems like a pretty boring, generic, overrated Skylander. If you don't play him in the first game, and if you don't give him much of a chance, which I'm not even gonna like grill people for that, because to be fair, there are so many Skylanders to play. You know, I can't blame people if they only give Drobot a quick shot and they don't really get used to him and see his full potential. But once you've finally got used to everything with Drobot and you get all his upgrades, you got the ability to burn enemies behind you with his afterburners while flying, you got the ability to actually move crazy fast while flying and be able to shoot lasers at the same time you're doing it, shoot blade gears backwards at people that you can't usually shoot, be able to do an unprecedented amount of damage. Just everything about the way Drobot plays is really, really fun and really, really satisfying. And again, I think, just this constant argument of, oh, well, this character just hold down this attack button, again, could apply to just about any one of the Skylanders on this list if you really wanted it to. Like, again, with Bash, I could say, oh, you just roll up to people and tail swipe and tail swipe until they're dead. With Ghost Roaster, I could just say, oh, you just keep going into skull mode and charging people down and all that. That's all you do with this character. You know, you can always say, oh, this character just does this, and like simplify it down when there's actually more to it than that. Anyway, the next one in the life element, Zook. Honestly, have to think about this one. I could put him there. Zook is often a pick for an underrated Skylander in the first game, and I kind of agree. I think that it's completely understandable, though, that he's underrated, just because, again, he's in the life element, and the life element has just knocked it out of the park time and time again with its Skylanders. So I feel like it's completely warranted that Zook is forgotten, although I'm glad that people are now starting to remember how good he really was. Because, again, he's just in an element with so many good Skylanders, it's kind of hard to remember that, yeah, he was pretty good compared to some of the other ones. Essentially, he's able to shoot these bamboo bazooka shots from his gun, and he's able to summon barriers. And his third attack allows him to shoot it like a mortar into the air, where it will later land down in front of him. And all this at first seems very boring. Okay, so he has a barrier, which is very narrow in uses because it can't deal any damage, and it basically just exists to provide you some protection while you're shooting, but the barrier can be broken pretty easily, and what if the enemies just go around the barrier and all that? You know, it seems like he's quite bad at that point. But then, when you start upgrading him, he gets really interesting. The ability to have his shrapnel upgraded from his shots allows him to do good crowd control with his main shot. But I think more importantly, the ability to turn his barrier from bamboo into mushrooms, then into cacti, which are actually able to damage enemies while they're touching the barriers, really makes them useful, especially once you get the combination of upgrades, where there's one which makes his mortar attack plant cacti when it hits the ground, and there's another one which makes his mortar attack split into 3 shots when it hits the ground. So it does 1 hit and then it does 3 other hits around it, and that works with synergy. It synergizes with the other one, which plants things as it lands, and that means that you actually get 4 cacti wherever it lands in like a circle kind of pattern. And using that, you can just be putting cacti all over the place that are making it so enemies can't go one step without getting melted by constant damage from the cacti. Definitely Zook is a very fun character to play, and probably one of the stronger characters in the game in terms of his damage output. It's just that not in an obvious way, not in a you keep pressing the attack button way, more in the way of trapping them in this constantly growing like army of cacti. So yeah. And finally, for the undead element, for their third pick, Chop Chop. I will say this, so Chop Chop, of course, is another fan favourite. I love the idea of Chop Chop. I already really like the idea of the Archeans in Skylanders lore, and the idea that Chop Chop is this like undead Archean warrior. I love that. And I loved his voice, and I loved how he had multiple catchphrases in the first game, and they all felt really cool. Definitely one of the most badass ones in the first game. And of course, he has a simple playstyle. He swings around his sword. He has a shield, but there's not much point in using it, to be honest. It doesn't actually block all damage, it just blocks most damage, so, yeesh. And, okay, one thing that is kind of funny is I remembered he had a third attack where he jumped and slammed the ground, and then with his sword, and then bone brambles would come up out of the ground and hit enemies. I remember that attack being super powerful. I remember especially his soul gem, which made it deal even more damage, was insane. I remember melting enemies with that. I remember thinking that was one of the strongest moves in the entire game. But now I'm hearing everyone saying it was extremely weak and barely worth using, and I don't know if everyone else is crazy, or if I just need to get that move again and try it again and realize it doesn't do as much damage as I think. But I remember that move absolutely melting enemies, especially larger enemies who get hit multiple times by the same one attack. So yeah, Chop Chop definitely one that most people like, but again, this is a good example of why I keep bringing up this whole, you could make the argument that any Skylander is a button mashy, like, boring mess. Because Chop Chop is a fan favourite, but people say that the Bone Brambles attack is bad, and they say that the shield attack is bad, which means that what does he have except his sword? You just kind of hit the sword button. So, do I think Chop Chop is good, or do I think he's just a button masher character? I think it's half and half. I think it is half true that Chop Chop is overrated because he is just a button masher character, but emphasis on half true. I would probably put him... Actually, I'd probably put him here. Yeah. I don't mind people liking Chop Chop so much because I think he's a really cool idea for a Skylander. I love his design, and I can't deny he's fun to play. But definitely I think it is half true what they say about him being button mashy, because you do kind of just use the sword. Again, I at least used the Bone Brambles as well, but again, apparently no one else really did, and apparently they're really weak. Again, I remember them being really strong, and I don't know, again, I'm just having another Mandela effect moment or whatever. But it's, the fact that his shield is near useless obviously is a big downside, and his shield upgrade path as a result is near useless. But he does at least have, obviously, just the badassery of that when his sword is fully upgraded on the sword path, it literally is just on fire at all times and is enormous and glowing and all that. And obviously the ability to do combos with his character helps him be at least a little bit less brainless when you're just pressing that attack button. So yeah, honestly I want to say more about him because obviously he's such a fan favourite and I don't want to make it seem like I'm selling him short. But at the same time, when I come around to explaining why he's a fan favourite, I think it is just he's satisfying to hit people with and he's a cool design. I think it just comes down to that. I can't think of anything else about Chop Chop that makes him really stand out, which is why I wouldn't put him in S tier, even though definitely I know there's other people who would. But I still think he's deserving of A tier. Warnado, here we go in the air element. Final one for the air element. Warnado is the final Skylander in the first game that was added to my collection. They were an absolute nightmare to find. They were the hardest Skylander that I had for me to find and get out of the entire first game's collection. Which is kind of funny, because at least as far as I'm aware, it seems like he's not that hard to get now for most people. But at least when the game was new and I was trying to get him, I couldn't find him anywhere. I think I literally only saw him once ever in real life, and that was obviously when I got him. So yeah, Warnado, what do I think of him? Well, I'm not going to lie, if I was going purely off my memory of him, he would be here. But actually, I'm going to put him here. Nah, I'm kidding. Okay, so basically, Warnado. I went on a bit of a emotional roller coaster here because I remembered loving them. I remember thinking, God damn, this is one of the coolest characters in the game. But then, when I actually came around to trying to remember later why I loved him, I'm just like, I can't remember. I just vaguely remember thinking he felt like he had a higher skill ceiling than a lot of the other characters, and vaguely remember him being really fast and cool looking, but like, I don't remember much of what he did. And so when I came back to replay the games at first, I was at first kind of horrified when I put a brand new Warnado on the portal, and I'm like, wait, this guy sucks. Wait, okay, maybe I just need to upgrade him, and I get his first few upgrades and he's still garbage, and I'm like, wait, oh no, did I just completely remember this guy wrong? Did I really just like him because it took so long to get him that like I convinced myself he was great when he wasn't? Until I took his top path. Yeah, this is why it was a bit of an emotional roller coaster, because I remembered him being amazing, and then I played him like, wait, he's garbage. And then I remembered his top path, and I got his top path, and you know what? He's not top of S tier, but he's S tier. I wouldn't put him above Drobot, but he is absolutely one of the most fun characters to play in Spyro's Adventure, and I think it's criminal that most people don't seem to like him, but I at least understand it, because I imagine the people who consider Warnado to be boring and forgettable, I imagine for the most part that's because Warnado is, well, he's not very good if you don't take his top path. I can only imagine those poor unfortunate souls never took his top path. Because, yeah, as I say, I remembered vaguely that he was very fast and very fun to play and very high skill ceiling. But then when I played him, he actually, like, when I came back and I got a brand new Warnado on the portal with no, like, upgrades carried over, and he was just extremely slow all of a sudden. I'm like, was he always this slow? And I couldn't understand it. I thought, and at first I didn't panic because I thought, oh, it's got to be the fly move. His fly move must have made him fast. And then I got his fly move, and it definitely made him faster, but it was actually one of the slower flight moves out of the other Skylanders in the game, and I was like, oh no. His damage output with his shell attack was enough, but it wasn't really very much, even for the first game standards. And his Tornado, although it could pick up enemies to briefly make them unable to attack you, which is convenient for, you know, just staying alive, in terms of its damage output, it was also pathetic, especially considering its short range and awkward, like, setup, since it takes so long to actually cast it, so to speak, and they had to be right in the center of the tornado for the tornado to pick them up. So I was really getting worried that he would be bad, but then when you take the top path, everything gets better. Probably one of the biggest things is that one of the upgrades that seems very inconspicuous, but is actually very important on the top path, is one that simply increases the damage of his shell spin and makes it go further. And that doesn't sound like much, but once you get this upgrade, spamming his shell spin makes him basically stealth elf speed with front flips. He just shreds through levels. He's a bolt of lightning. He's just shooting. He's more of a bolt of lightning than lightning rod. He just charges through all the levels. He doesn't give a fuck. Nah, but he becomes genuinely one of the fastest characters in the entire game once you get that, which obviously already is quite a nice thing to have. But another thing is, I swear there was more interesting stuff you could do with this tornado. But when I first got it, all I could do was I could cast other tornadoes from his flying tornado still, but they weren't any different from normal than if I casted them outside the tornado. And I couldn't use my shell spin obviously while in the tornado, so I was a bit like, oh, did I just remember this wrong? But then of course, top upgrade path, I see it. An upgrade that makes it so that inside your tornado are 5 little mini Warnados that also fly in it with you, and now when you press the attack to do the shell spin attack, but you're in the tornado, it fires out these mini Warnados, and they bounce off walls and deal a good amount of damage to anything that they hit, although it's awkward to aim them. That isn't even the coolest part though. That is when you get the final upgrade, which allows you to hold down the attack button to stop your tornado, slam down on the ground and shoot out all of your Warnados at once. Combining all these things together, Warnado is one of the most fun Skylanders to play in the first game, and I would even argue one of the more powerful ones. Not the most powerful, that's definitely Drobot, like no question Drobot. Like actually, I can see Stealth is strong, but I've already mentioned why she can't actually really dodge attacks. If you're talking about sheer try hard, beat the game, try not to get hit kind of stuff, but still deal a bunch of damage, Drobot unquestionably is the best. However, Warnado, I've got to admit, he comes close. As I say, he's so fast that it can be really hard to hit him. He's also got a good amount of armor because of his shell and his soul gem upgrade. So he's just difficult to kill him in general, and he's got insane damage output, especially in enclosed areas where you can have the mini Warnados bounce off walls and hit the same enemy multiple times. Absolutely love this Skylander. I'm so glad that he was just as good as I remembered. It's just that I had to take the right upgrade path. I just think it's a shame that his bottom path is, I guess, basically just 100% useless, because like, I mean, to be fair, I haven't got around to using it yet since I've come back to replaying these games. Maybe it won't be as bad as I remember, but like, I feel like even if it isn't bad, even if it's good, I could never sacrifice the upgrade to the top path for it, no matter how good it is. Even if it makes the tornadoes deal 100 damage, I think I still want the top path for the speed and the ability to attack while in the tornado. So, yeah. Anyway, I think Warnado is a massively underrated Skylander from the first game. I think that, honestly, I am so mad that Warnado never got a Series 2, because I think the main problem with Warnado is he just needs more upgrades that are actually useful. Like, half of his upgrades are crazy useful and half of them do nothing. So I just wish he had more useful upgrades and less upgrades that feel like they're filler. So, yeah. Dino-Rang for the Earth element. I'm going to put Dino-Rang at A tier, and I think he'll put him... Yeah, no, he belongs here. I'm not just putting him on the end for any reason. I am doing these ordered within tiers, but I do think he's probably the worst in A tier here. It's just a coincidence it went like that. But anyway, yes, Dino-Rang. So, not a commonly talked about Skylander out of the Skylanders from the first game. When people talk about Skylanders from the Earth element in the first game, they're either talking about Bash, Prism Break, or Terrafin, and Dino-Rang's mostly forgotten. I admit, maybe that's partially because he doesn't feel like an Earth element Skylander that much, but I gotta say, I wish he was talked about more, because I swear Dino-Rang is one of the cooler ones in the first game. I think it's absolutely criminal he never got a Series 2, or a Light Core, or a reskin. The only thing he ever got was an Eon's Elite, which, if you aren't aware, because I wasn't aware until, I came back, in the 4th game Trap Team, they started making Eon's Elites versions of some of the first game Skylanders, who essentially were the same as a normal Skylander, except they had a golden base instead of a normal coloured one, and if you played them in one of the later games, they would have tripled stats, so they'd have triple health and all that. But they wouldn't actually have any new moves, they wouldn't actually have any new look to them. And I think it's a shame that that's the only thing Dino-Rang ever got, because I think he absolutely deserves to get a Series 2 or at least a reskin. Because, honestly, the way this guy plays is really nice in my opinion. The ability to throw boomerangs and all that just in general, it's a nice projectile to be able to use, because, there's so many projectiles in this game that just go in a straight line, and it's nice to have one that has a bit more going on with it, especially once you get the upgrade that allows it to bounce off walls. You can actually kind of go for some trick shots and all that, which is really nice to have. But honestly, one thing that I think is very underrated about Dino-Rang is the ability to control his boomerang manually. I understand why it's not talked about much, because you obviously can't control Dino-Rang while you're controlling the boomerang, which makes it hard to use it in the middle of a fight. but I really appreciate it because, okay, a lot of Skylanders are just button mashy. It's just a fact. And I'm not saying that means Skylanders is bad, but a lot of them are like that. There's certainly ones that take more skill, but a lot of them are just kind of press the button. And so, for that reason, I really appreciate the ability to control the boomerangs, because the other way that you could kind of make these characters more less button mashy is if they were really fast, and so you had to put more effort into aiming your shots and dodging because you had increased speed. But of course, Skylanders, all the characters move so slow, it feels like that isn't really the case a lot of the time. So it's nice that even though Dino-Rang can't move fast, his extremely fast-moving boomerangs can be controlled. And if you've ever tried to control those boomerangs, they're insanely fast. I'd actually say that it might be one of the more high skill ceiling things you can do in the first game is accurately control boomerangs around walls and turns and all that without having them break on the walls. And being able to do that is just really satisfying and fun to be able to pull off. It can also be used to cheese some fights by killing enemies before they even realise you're there, but you know. But let's just talk about his first attack. Of course, he's also got the Boomerang Shield, which is a nice way to melt things down a bit faster if you were disappointed by his DPS, which I'll admit is a little bit low. And I believe, remember, the Boomerang Shield even protects you from projectiles. I think projectiles that hit the boomerangs get destroyed when you use that move, which is quite nice. And finally, the Stone Fist traps, which admittedly are kind of impractical to use in practice, but the upgrade that allows killed enemies to leave behind Stone Fist traps can be really, really convenient, although unfortunately it does force you to take the path that makes his boomerangs weaker. It can really turn some battles where, like, a lot of battles that are tough are usually ones where there's one big enemy and then lots of small enemies distracting you from dodging that big enemy's attacks. And it's really convenient when you can turn all those small enemies into just a whole bunch of Stone Fist traps to absolutely clobber that one big enemy to death. So yeah, I think Dino-Rang is very underrated, considering that he is, in my opinion, the most fun Skylander of the Earth element in the first game by far, and yet he seems to be the most forgotten in the first game, if anything, which I think is an absolute tragedy. However, speaking of forgotten Skylanders, Dino-Rang might be pretty forgotten, but no one has been more forgotten than Sunburn. Oh boy, so if you don't know, it's kind of a meme in the community that we pity Sunburn because of the fact that Sunburn is the only Skylander out of all 32 from the first game that never got any other kind of figure. Drobot, in fact, yeah, I'm literally going to go through the list. Drobot got a Series 2 and a Light Core. Series 2 obviously gives him a new upgrade. Light Core made him light up on the portal. Warnado, unfortunately, only got a Light Core, but still he got something. Flameslinger got a Series 2. Gill Grunt got quite a few. Let's see if I can remember. Gill Grunt got his original version, Gill Grunt Series 2, Anchors Away Gill Grunt, Tidal Wave Gill Grunt, and Deep Dive Gill Grunt. I don't think he ever got any reskins, but I mean, if he's got that many series, like 4 series, and then his Supercharger version, and I think that's enough. Stealth Elf got a Series 2 and Ninja Stealth Elf, and I think that's it. Ignitor got a Series 2. Double Trouble got a reskin in Royal Double Trouble and a Series 2. Zook got a Series 2. Chop Chop got a Series 2 and then got Twin Blade Chop Chop as well. Dino-Rang at least got an Eon's Elite, even though that's not much, it's something. Hex got a Light Core and a Series 2. Drill Sergeant got a Series 2. If I remember right, Eruptor got a Series 2, he got a reskin called Volcanic Eruptor, and he got a Series 3 Lava Bath Eruptor. Terrafin got a Series 2, and he got a Series 3 called Knockout Terrafin. Lightning Rod got a Series 2. Yes, I am doing these all. Stump Smash got a Series 2. Sonic Boom got a Series 2. Prism Break got a Series 2, and then got Hyper Beam Prism Break as well, and Light Core Prism Break. Trigger Happy. How many things did Trigger Happy get? He got a Series 2, he got Big Bang Trigger Happy, and he got Springtime Trigger Happy. I think that's it. Yeah. Slambam got a Series 2 and a reskin in Legendary Slambam. Ghost Roaster only got an Eon's Elite, but at least again that's something. Whirlwind got a Series 2 and a Series 3 Hornblast Whirlwind, I believe. Zap got a Series 2, and I think that was it. Spyro got more than a few. He got there was Spyro, Dark Spyro in the first game, and then there was Series 2 Spyro, and then there was Mega Ram Spyro in Swap Force and Dark Mega Ram Spyro from the Dark Starter Pack in Swap Force. Bash got a Series 2. Wrecking Ball got a Series 2. Wham-Shell only got a Light Core, but again, that's something. Voodood only got an Eon's Elite, but again, that's something. Boomer got an Eon's Elite. Camo got Thornhorn Camo in Swap Force. Cynder got a Series 2, and I think they had a Series 3 called Phantom Cynder. and Sunburn is the only character that never got any Light Core, any Series 2, any Series 3, whatever, any reskin, any Eons Elite. There's just the original Sunburn and no other Sunburn figures, which I honestly think is kind of weird, because the Eons Elites, the choices seem kind of weird unless they were literally just choosing them because they realized those toys had no other figure. Like, you know, the Dino-Rang one had no Series 2, had no Light Core. I feel like they almost made the Eons Elite Dino-Rang just because they're like, oh wait, shit, we don't have a Dino-Rang one. Here you go. But they didn't make one for Sunburn. Who was the Eons Elite for Fire? I must have already said it as well, and I've already forgotten. Oh well. So yeah, the point is, this character never got re-released. But what I actually think of him? Well, I have to admit, this is one of the last ones I got. Obviously, all of these ones I'm ranking now are some of the last ones I got. Sunburn's Dragon's Peak Adventure Pack was the last adventure pack I ever got. It was really difficult for me to find, but I eventually got it. And I've got to admit, it kind of disappointed me, if I'm honest. I'm talking about the adventure pack here, to be fair, so that doesn't really bear a ranking on Sunburn. Dragon's Peak I thought looked like a really cool designed level, the way it looked was really cool, but the level itself kind of disappointed me. The enemies were mostly either way too easy or super annoying, and I felt like I spent half the level just waiting for the fire traps to stop breathing fire and so I could move forward, or just flying on Flavius to get to for the next part in the level, which those flying sections weren't that fun in my opinion. So yeah, I was a bit disappointed by the adventure pack, and I have to admit I was also a bit disappointed by Sunburn. To be fair, I wasn't sure what to think of Sunburn. They did look like, okay, so they're a Phoenix Dragon, they're probably just going to breathe fire and stuff like that. I'm not sure what they're going to do for this one, because it seems like what else would they do but breathe fire, but at the same time, they've got to come up with 3 moves, and obviously there are some other ones that looked very boring that later impressed me. As I said, like Ignitor. Ignitor looked really boring to me, but then they impressed me with how he actually played. So I was thinking that might happen with Sunburn, but honestly in the end I have to say I don't think it did. I don't want to put more hate on Sunburn considering that he already doesn't have any other figures, but at the same time I gotta be honest, I don't know, that feels low. That feels too low. Because when I think of my most disliked Skylanders, Sunburn doesn't come to mind. I don't think, oh yeah, I hate Sunburn. But at the same time, why would I like Sunburn? So the first move is that they can breathe fire. Cool, I guess. Not exactly unexpected or creative, but cool. It's got a very short range, but it does have some range, and it deals damage over time, but it overheats eventually. But when fully upgraded, it doesn't overheat. He has a second move which allows him to teleport, and when he goes into and out of the teleport, there's a burst of flame at both places, which can damage enemies. And you can upgrade it so he can teleport in 4 different directions. You can pick which one by holding down the teleport button to wait before you reappear and pressing in the direction you want to go. Doing that allows you to be a bit more flexible with where you want to go with Sunburn, but the thing is the teleport itself is already slow, so you don't usually get that much use out of the option to go multiple different ways. I don't know, if there was more... I mean, obviously you had the option to two-player flat fight with another Skylander, but if there was more actual PvP, player versus player situations in Skylanders games, maybe the mind games of not knowing which one you teleport to could be more useful, but obviously the way it is now, where almost all Skylanders content is just, battling computers that don't realise that you could go to any of those 4 positions, it's not very useful in my experience. It's cool to show off, oh, I could go to any one of these, ooh, but in reality, it's rarely really a good idea to go in any direction except forward. And his third attack is that he briefly goes into a Phoenix Dash, where he's made completely of flame, and he damages anyone who touches him, and he moves a little bit faster. But then unfortunately it can't really be used that much as a burst movement option, because at the end of it there's an explosion of flame, which does do extra damage to enemies, but it's not that much extra, and the explosion of flame forces Sunburn to stop moving until it's done. So yeah, I find that the best way to play Sunburn usually is just to hold down his fire breath and stare at enemies until they're dead. Especially because when you take the path for his fire breath, well, he gets stronger with his fire breath the longer you hold it down, until when fully upgraded you can even get it so that his body gets made completely of fire when it's fully charged, so that even enemies who touch the side of him get burned, although he can still be hurt. So yeah, not gonna lie, it is kind of satisfying to melt down enemies with Sunburn like that, but definitely in terms of how good I think he really is in the game, in terms of how fun he is, how much there's got going on with them. I can't say much about them. Like, again, they don't come to mind to me as like a, oh yeah, I really don't like them. But like, at the same time, when I think of reasons to say I like Sunburn, I struggle. When, at least for a lot of the D tiers here, which even if I do think of some of them as ones I quote-unquote don't like Spyro, at least for Spyro I can think, well, no, I like that he can charge and he can move quite fast, and well, I kind of like that bash move even though it's a little bit impractical. And with Whirlwind I can say, well, I don't like how weak their damage feels, but I do like the ideas of their moves and all that, and similar with Zap and all that. Whereas with Sunburn I'm like, I don't even really like the ideas. I'm kind of a bit disappointed there wasn't more going on with them. So yeah, I put them in E tier. Anyway, Wham-Shell. Oh boy, this might be interesting. So, from what I've seen, no one could agree on how good or bad Wham-Shell is, because I see people putting it at the top of their lists, at the bottom of their lists, in the middle. It doesn't seem like there's any consistency for Wham-Shell, and honestly that kind of makes sense to me. Obviously with the context of knowing that Wham-Shell was never in any of the triple packs, and they were the only Skylander to not be an adventure pack or a triple pack in the first game, which is why he was the rarest for most people, even though I never had any trouble getting him. It obviously leads to some people overrating him because of the fact it took so long for them to get him. In fact, that might be how you feel I ranked Warnado so high. I genuinely do think he's really fun to play, but I mean, you could make an argument that it's just because he's super rare, and for me at least, it was so difficult to get him. But similarly, I think definitely, I feel like some people who are saying Wham-Shell's their absolute favourite in the first game, maybe are letting the fact he was so hard to get kind of cloud their judgment. Because, I couldn't feel more middling on Wham-Shell, to be honest, I don't think. Well, I say that. No, yeah. I would put Wham-Shell here. No, here. I put him there. You know what, honestly, yeah, next to Slambam. Because honestly, Wham-Shell and Slambam kind of play a bit similarly. So yeah, Wham-Shell obviously has a mace, and as such, he plays kind of just like another melee combo character. You just kind of whack things in front of you. You do have a projectile. You can shoot starfishes from your mace. However, the move is pretty slow. The starfishes are pretty short range. They're longer range than, you know, a normal mace swing, but they don't go very far before they disappear still. And they don't do much damage either. It's basically just there as a absolutely desperate to hit this enemy and I can't get close enough to hit them move. Like, in terms of actually trying to deal the most damage possible, you would never use this move unless you couldn't hit an enemy otherwise, unless you use something with a bit more range. His third attack allows him to slam his mace downwards and electricity shoots out. And it's certainly strong, but as you can imagine, it's a little bit impractical. It's sometimes difficult to actually get close enough to hit it, or to get enough time to be able to do it without getting hit yourself. And there's not much else you can do with it except just press the button and zap things. So why do I put Wham-Shell why don't I put them lower if I have a lot of negative things to say about them? Well, I have to say, I do genuinely appreciate his design, and there's lots of little weird quirks with Wham-Shell, which technically I should probably say are bad things, but honestly I have to admit, I kind of like them in a weird way, even though I think they're probably bad things to most people. Like, for example, his mace swings. So it's actually kind of awkward to hit his mace swings, but it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. It sounds like just a bad thing at first, because essentially, when most people have like a 3-hit combo attack, you know, usually it's a swipe from the right to the left, swipe from the left to the right, and then a big hit directly in front. You know, that's what you expect. And generally, if an enemy is in front of you, they get hit. Well, how Wham-Shell's works is a bit weird. He kind of has a poke directly forward with the mace to start, which doesn't really hit the sides very well, so you have to make sure you're directly facing whoever you're trying to hit. And then a swipe that kind of goes from his left or over to the center, but not all the way to the right, so you have to make sure that an enemy isn't too far to your right when you try to get them with the second hit, otherwise it'll miss. And then finally, for his like third strong hit, if you're doing the combo, he'll lunge forward and slide with the mace while spinning it, which is actually a multi-hit. I'm pretty sure every other combo, like big hit thing at the end, is just one single slam with every other character. I think Wham-Shell's the only one who has like a multi-hit. Oh wait, was Chop Chop's a multi-hit? I can't remember if that was one of the upgrade like combos or if that was his normal combo. Well, either way, I don't think many characters have that. So I obviously appreciate that Wham-Shell has something a little bit different for his combo move, and especially it becomes simultaneously awkward to use, but kind of fun to use when it works because of how awkward it is to set up. When you have to get it so that his spinning mace like actually hits, because just like his first attack, it's directly forward and it doesn't get catch the size very well, and he's forced to slide forwards while doing it. So sometimes if you slide forwards too hard into an enemy, he will slide directly at them and then knock the side of the enemy and go past them and get pushed in the wrong direction with their momentum and not hit them. And again, all these things sound like bad, but weirdly, it kind of makes me enjoy playing Wham-Shell a little bit more. Like, they're technically bad things, because, like, technically, if you're just trying to hit enemies, it's kind of annoying having these things go wrong. But it does make it a little bit more engaging to play him, to have to look out for all these weird little quirks with his melee combat to make sure that your hits don't miss. I don't know. It sounds so weird to explain it like this. This is why, like, I'm not going to put him that high, because everything I just said, like, the way I put it and how I actually enjoy it, I'm talking about him like I might put him in B tier or even A tier. And part of me almost wants to, but I know that objectively a lot of these things are very, like, bad things to most people. I could never... You know, I can kind of get, like, no one can decide where to put Wham-Shell. Like, everyone puts them, like, S tier, F tier, or, like, smack in the center, because it depends what perspective you're looking at him from. To be fair, I'm not sure I could ever understand why people put him in S tier, because as much as I can like him if I try to like him, I feel like he just doesn't have as much interesting stuff going on in his kit to justify a placement in S tier. But definitely, as I say, overall, I like him, sort of, but he's got a lot of things about him that are a bit questionable, and he could definitely have a few more creative things going on in his kit if he wants to be in a higher tier. Anyway, Voodood. This guy, not gonna lie, here. So yeah, I never really liked Voodood. I found him extremely forgettable. I found him a waste of the magic element slot, like most of them were in the first game. Again, I feel like Double Trouble was the only one that made good use of the magic element in the first game. I get that it's Voodoo, but like, honestly, put that in Undead and make him more Undead themed. I think that would be cooler. Drop Ghost Roaster. Put in Voodood. But yeah. Honestly, I don't even remember much about Voodood. He was probably one of my lesser played ones. I do like the idea of the electricity tripwires, but if I remembered correctly, they didn't do very much damage and they felt very unrewarding to use. It always felt like to me, if I remember correctly, that with Voodood, it was always just most rewarding to just swing his axe and do nothing else. And his axe didn't feel particularly satisfying or powerful, it just felt like it did the job and not much else. So yeah, that's why, yeah, I put Voodood at D. Honestly, you know what, I'd do this. They were better than Sunburn, but definitely not one of my favourites. I've seen a couple people say Voodood is their least favourite in the first game, and I can get behind that, even though, of course, you can see I've not put him quite at the bottom. But I've put him pretty low. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that placement. I would say more, but there's not really much more for me to say. I just remember, like, his axe just being, like, all I used with him for the most part, and the other stuff feeling very impractical and hard to use. And even if you did use it, it wasn't very satisfying, it wasn't very rewarding, you didn't get that much damage. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep him there. I don't know, it does bug me a bit that now I'm trying to... I thought I remembered more about him, but now I'm talking about him and I'm realising I've forgotten a lot about him, but I think that's just because he wasn't very memorable. Again, if you're thinking that, oh, you want some more reasoning for some of these rankings, again, like, I'm probably going to be making more high effort videos. I'll talk about each of these Skylanders in future, and if you think I've not given them a fair shot here, then I will be giving them a fair shot then. But yeah. Anyway, moving on to the tech element, the final one I haven't ranked is Boomer. So, Boomer, how do I feel about you? Well, I think I'm going to put Boomer here. I used to think of Boomer as a massive disappointment. Honestly, a younger me might have put Boomer all the way down here as the worst in the game. Boomer was very boring in concept to me. Like, okay, he's a goblin, he throws bombs, okay. And, you know, he was in all the adverts for the game, and I remember, like, always feeling a bit patronized by how there was so many levers where it's like just rumors saying, ha, blow it up, ha, blow it up, just blow it up. And it's like, okay, I get it. Ha, it's funny when things blow up. You know, I just found it kind of obnoxious. And I thought it was just so boring. It was such a disappointment because you look at the other Skylanders in the tech element, and at least to me, I see Drobot. Oh my god, he's sick. I see Drill Sergeant. Oh my god, that's so cool. He's literally got like a train front for a face, and he's Archean, and he's got the homing drill shots. You got Trigger Happy, who I wasn't as crazy about, but certainly was satisfying and fun to play. And then you just got this Goblin, and it's like, okay, what do? You throw dynamite. Okay, cool. I've got someone else who can throw explosive homing drill arms. Like, I think that's a little bit cooler. You know, seeing his second attack was literally just a ground pound. Was like, that's not even like that's like an earth element like Skylanders kind of attack. Why? Like, it feels like that's not even techy. I get that explosives are pretty techy, but like other than that, it felt like Boomer was a real like odd one out in the tech element. And again, at first, I just really didn't like it. But I think that I've definitely been too harsh on him. I think that I've definitely come to like him more over time. And I don't mean just now, just replaying the game now, because I remember just before I stopped playing Skylanders years ago, I gave Boomer one last chance, and I did find him more fun than I expected. The main thing that bothers me about him, though, is that it does feel like his dynamite is his only move. Well, I say that. His ground pound is good against chompies. I know that sounds like I'm literally trying to make a point to put him down, but like, genuinely, if you've got loads of chompies surrounding you at the same time you're trying to deal with something else, just using one ground pound to kill all the chompies at once is convenient, especially if you've got chompy pods like spawning things around you. But other than that, his ground pound is near useless. You would almost always rather use his explosives because they also deal crowd control damage. You know, they also hit a large area, but they deal more damage. And you have to aim them, I guess. That's the only other thing, but like, they're not that hard to aim. And his third attack, Troll Bomb, does do a decent amount of damage, but it takes ages to detonate. And you can't really do much to set it up so that, oh yeah, this will definitely hit. It just feels like you kind of drop one every now and then to see if it hits, and it's kind of just luck if it does or doesn't. So much more often, I just kind of like to keep pressing the shoot button and throwing more dynamite. The ability to kick the Troll Bombs once you get the Soul Gem makes them a bit more useful, but certainly they do feel like a little bit of an afterthought in his kit. All this would seriously make me think, oh no, Boomer's forgettable, boring, like a disappointment. But the reason why I put him so high is because I must admit, there's one upgrade which I love, which is the one that makes it so that his dynamite, instead of throwing a single stick, he throws a whole barrel of it that splits into 3 more. I don't know, like I almost hate putting someone this high just based on one upgrade, but the satisfaction factor of Boomer, once you have that upgrade, goes up massively. He's so fun and satisfying to play once your dynamite starts splitting into multiple explosions at once. It's a genius upgrade, I'll say that much. And Camo. So, you might have thought I had a full collection from how long I've been talking about all these Skylanders, but back in the day, Camo drove me up the wall because I owned 31 out of 32 Skylanders in the first game. And back in the day, I never owned Camo. And that really hurt me. Do you know why? I had a friend who owned Camo, and so I played it at their house. And I gotta say, from what I played, and from what I played of him now, coming back to the games, he is one of the most fun characters in the first game, and I feel so mad that I never got him. I saw him one time in real life in my entire life, like before this point, and that was at a shop, and it was the same time I saw Warnado, and I'd never seen Warnado either, and I didn't know which one to pick, and I picked Warnado. And I don't know if like I made the wrong decision there necessarily, because maybe if I picked Camo and not Warnado, then I'd be saying the same thing about Warnado, like, oh god, I wish I picked Warnado instead of Camo, you know. It might be a grass is greener on the other side thing, but I'm kicking myself that I didn't get Camo there, because even though I only saw, that was also the only time I ever saw Warnado in real life, I did see more kind of like stuff on eBay for like getting a Warnado after I got it in real life, where I didn't see so many for Camo. So yeah, anyway, that's just talking about my personal experience. How about the actual characters themselves? I really like them obviously. They're in S tier. Bottom of S tier, but they're in S tier. They're able to obviously shoot bursts of sun from their mouth, which is really cool. It's a very satisfying projectile. It's got a decent amount of range. It's got a slight amount of splash damage, so you can hit multiple enemies with it, even though you have to get them really close together to do so. It attacks pretty fast. It's just generally very satisfying to use. But as well as that, he's got his second attack, the Firecracker Vines. Oh boy, are those things satisfying to use. You can clear out entire crowds with those with just one press of a button once you got those fully upgraded. And they're quite interesting to use, those things, like trying to control the direction they're going so that they'll get the maximum amount of potential damage is quite interesting. I don't know how else to put it. It just feels like there's like a lot to it. Like if I played them longer, then it would probably just grow on me even more. And even the melon attack, which most people seem to say is pretty bad, I have to admit I'm a little bit disappointed that it's so slow and there's not much else you can do with it except hold it down longer to wait to release the melons. But in terms of its pure damage output, I've heard people say that it's really weak, but I mean, those damage numbers, if I remember right, 60 damage if a melon hits if you take the actual melon path. 60 damage is a lot of damage, considering that there's multiple of these melons and multiple of them can hit one target if the target is big enough. Again, the triple-digit damage numbers in the first game are practically unheard of even for enormous moves. So being able to hit one enemy with 2 melons is already more than 100 damage, which is insane by the standards of the first game. So yeah, I think Camo is both one of the stronger characters in the first game, one of the more fun characters in the first game, and just generally, I really like its design. For the most part, when it came to all these dragon Skylanders in the first game, they're, as you can see, typically not the ones I go for. You know, we got, because if you didn't realize, every element in the first game had a dragon. The fire dragon is obviously a Sunburn. The air dragon was Whirlwind, because she's a dragon unicorn, because they just have to have a dragon. Zap is obviously the water dragon. Bash is the earth dragon. You might have thought he's a dinosaur. He basically is, because his final upgrade is literally called Triceratops Honor Guard, his soldier upgrade. But technically, in the lore, they still call him an earth dragon. He just doesn't have wings, but yeah, he's a dinosaur, really. But they call him a dragon. Obviously, Spyro is the magic dragon. Drobot is the tech dragon. And Cynder is the undead dragon. And we got the life dragon here, Camo. And most of these dragons, they weren't my favourites, as you can see, except for Drobot. But Camo, I really like the design of. I didn't actually mention that when I was talking about Drobot. I didn't actually know what I thought about Drobot at first. Like, when I just looked at the preview of him, I thought he looked like... Like, not bad, not good either. It wasn't until I played him that I realised how much I love him. Like, even his design, I was like, it's alright. I kind of don't like how the dragon underneath all the robot armour kind of just looks like a weird lizard. I don't know, like, I didn't like his colour palette of what he looks like under the armour. Camo is like one of the only dragons that I think the way they look in this game is really cool. The leaf tail, the like spiky, like red kind of feet thing. The fact that he could breathe sun rather than fire, like I like that because it's still very dragon-like because obviously it's close to fire, but it makes sense for a plant dragon to do that. I love everything about it. I think the only thing that puts me a little bit off about Camo's design is I kind of don't like how his like full-on red eyes kind of make him look a bit evil. But other than that, I love the way Camo looks, I love the way they play, and I just wish that they were added to my collection sooner. Anyway, and finally, we got Cynder, the undead dragon. Okay, no, not that low. We're not going to go that low. But we're still going to go pretty low. But you know what? Yeah, yeah, okay. So when I went into this, I was expecting Cynder would be my bottom pick. But I think now I think about it, Wrecking Ball is probably worse than Cynder. So, Cynder, I will admit, maybe I just need to give her more of a chance. Cynder was one of the last Skylanders I ever got in the first game. As I say, the last one I got was, I think, was it Sunburn? I think it was. But Cynder was one of the last ones I got, and so I didn't play with her as much because, to be honest, she was not one I was going for in the first place, even before I played her. Like, something about her just made me think, I don't know, I don't think I care about getting this one. But obviously, eventually it got to the point where I'm like, well, I've nearly got all of them now. It's time to get Cynder, I guess. And I got her, and I'm like, you know what, maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe I'll end up liking her, actually. And, yeah, all I generally remember is, you see, I might be wrong here. I want to be clear that, like, I might, when I come back to replay these and give them more of a chance, I might change my mind on Cynder. Because in concept, I don't see much wrong with her moveset, just on a pure, like, judging it purely by what her moveset is. Her first ability is to be able to breathe lightning, instead of fire, obviously, to attack enemies from out range, but she moves much slower while breathing lightning, so you can't use it while dodging very easily like you can with a lot of other ranged attacks. But the lightning can hit, obviously, a lot of enemies at once. It's good for crowd control. She has a second attack where she kind of becomes a sort of phantom for a moment and dashes forward, and she leaves behind a trail of ghosts, which when enemies get close to the trail, the ghosts go up to the enemies and start attacking them, but it only deals a teeny bit of damage. And finally, she obviously can fly like all the other dragons to move a bit faster. So, what's the problem with Cynder? The problem with Cynder, from what I remember, is that everything she does doesn't do good damage. She is really, 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 really good at one thing from what I remember playing as her, and that is dealing with crowds of small enemies. The second you throw a single bulky enemy at her, she just crumbles, because she has the lightning, which does a large amount of damage to multiple enemies, but not so much damage to one single enemy, and she has the ghosts, which deal very little damage in their own right, and they have to be right next to the enemy to be able to hit them. So usually they're best when there's enemies everywhere, so all the ghosts can be attacking at once, rather than there's one big enemy, so only one or two of the ghosts are actually going to be attacking. And of course the third attack, flying, doesn't deal any damage, it just makes her move faster. So I always found it frustrating that so many times it felt like Cynder just had no good attacks for a situation. She was only good for clearing out crowds, and the second that you were in a situation that wasn't a crowd of small enemies, she just became so much weaker. All that being said, I've seen some people rank Cynder much more highly in their lists, and they usually talk about how insanely powerful her lightning breath was, which I'm having one of those moments of, no, that's not true, right? I remember her lightning breath basically dealing like no damage at all, even when fully upgraded. But then I've seen some footage of her lightning breath absolutely destroying hordes of enemies in like seconds, and I'm thinking, no, her lightning breath wasn't that strong, even fully upgraded. I swear it wasn't. So, you know, again, I'm having one of those moments of, do I just remember it wrong? Because it's just been too long. So certainly, if I replay Cynder and I find out that she is nowhere near as bad as I remembered, then I could definitely eat my words on this one. But again, going off of what I remembered from when I played the game when I was younger, and going off of what little gameplay I've had with her since I've come back to it, I've not been impressed. So I think that she deserves that placement. Part of me wants to put her above Bash, because I do think on a conceptual level, she has cooler ideas behind her abilities than Bash, and she also, just in general, I think the way she looks is a lot more appealing than the way Bash looks. However, gotta say that I don't think I can put her above Bash, because when you actually play as her, when you actually play as Bash, that's like the one thing he does right. You know, his look is boring, his ideas are boring, but at the end of the day, he's got that girthy tail swipe, it does a whole lot of damage, it's very practical for just combat in the game in general. Whereas Cynder's kind of the opposite. They look cool, their ideas of what their moves are supposed to be are cool, but the actual practicality when you play the game and fight things is just garbage from what I remembered. So that's why they rank so lowly. Anyway, that's it for this tier list. Of course, again, as a reminder, to be 100% clear, what I'm planning on doing with Skylanders content is, what I would have liked to do ideally was obviously to start off with a video that introduces everyone to Skylanders, but if I want to do that, I want to make it very highly edited and very high quality, and obviously I don't really have the time to do that right now, so that might be something that comes later. But what I will be doing in the meantime is I'll be doing a series looking at each one of these Skylanders individually, dedicating a whole video to talk about just one of them, talking about their upgrade paths, their strengths, their weaknesses, what I recommend them for, do I think they're fun and all that. So of course all these Skylanders will get another shot at being recognised in those videos. So don't worry if you feel like some of these have been sold short. I'm going to have to try all their upgrade paths again and try out all the situations in which they could possibly be good or bad or whatever. So don't you worry if you think I've been biased here. I will definitely be working to amend that. Anyway, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video, whichever that video ends up being. Bye.